Welcome to our panel discussion. The title is Brand Purpose, Be Brave or Go Home. Our terrific panelists include Thomas Colster, who I hope you've just heard from. Thomas is a marketing activist, creative director, and the founder of Goodvertising. He's based in Copenhagen, but as I think you just said, you're joining us today from Lisbon, which is very exciting in the post-COVID world. We're multi-cities. Welcome, Thomas.
No, thank you so much. Yes, I'm in Lisbon of all places right now, so not a bad place to be. Super excited to be joining this very important conversation, in fact.
Certainly not. I'm quite jealous. We also have Lisa Hastings, who's joining us from Sydney today. Lisa is a global creative director who works at SGK, a packaging and brand experience company, which works with many of the world's biggest brands. It's great to have you here today, Lisa.
Well, thanks for having me on. I don't have anywhere near as sexy a backdrop as the other two guys, and I can't even turn the computer around because it's the middle of the night and show you outdoors. But thanks for having me involved.
It's a shame you can't give us the envy of being in Australia coming into summer.
No, I should have just stuck a surfboard in the background.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And our third panelist is Jane McDaid, who is based where I am in Dublin. Jane is the founder and head of creative innovation at Thinkhouse, a full-service youth marketing agency. I've had the pleasure of listening to Jane speak before, and so I know that we have a lot to look forward to this morning. Nice to see you, Jane.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Thank you so much, and well done for pulling off this important event.
Yeah, thanks so much for the team at SX21 for having all of us, actually. As the title says, we're really aiming to be brave this morning, and I think it's inevitable that the subject of this panel will provoke an interesting discussion, because we're really not shying away from the challenges that brands face on this journey to becoming more purposeful. Really, at best, I suppose the topic of brand purpose can be very conceptual and hard to pin down, and at its worst, which is very relevant today, it can represent greenwashing by brands. So as part of our discussion today, we want to continue in the tone set so well by Thomas.
It's freezing for me.
And how you've noticed that brands act in this near delusional manner. I was wondering, do you think that the business case for brand purpose that we've all heard many times, how purposeful brands outgrow their competition or have better employee engagement and so on, do you think that created a situation where brands engaged in purpose-driven projects for the wrong reasons?
I guess the question was to me, or was that just an open panel question?
No, that was to you, Thomas. Yeah.
I absolutely just love, take a soft drink company and you have the board there and they're like, wait a moment, we know young people care about the climate, probably got to do something about our purpose, probably got to have something there sticking up on our corporate headquarters saying do good for people and planet. I think a lot of brands rushed into this wrongly. Because basically a brand is about consistency, and it's like people again. I mean, not everyone in this world needs to be ranting about climate change and social issues. For that sake, I still like them. I can still have a friend. I can go play football with him. That's fine. I think the brands unfortunately have gotten this wrong, and what I'm seeing at the moment, at least, is that some of the early numbers we had proving that purposeful brands outperformed regular brands. I'm starting to see some. I'm starting to see some pushback from the market, in fact, and probably because there are just too many value-driven, purpose-led brands out there. So I think people are starting to distrust these efforts, and in fact, that was also one of the key things why I felt I had to go up against some of my early held beliefs and write a new book called The Hero Trap.
Okay, that's so interesting. I actually have the next question that's in the same theme, which is for you, Lisa. How can a well-defined brand purpose lead to more sustainable decision-making in an organization? And I suppose then what ways is it a useful tool, not only for communications, but also internally at maybe those more fundamental stages?
And I think it's interesting to kind of unpack those two terms there, brand and purpose, that have become these big kind of blown out things. And look, Thomas touched on it a bit to say, look at purpose as a promise. And ultimately, we've been sold this big, and a brand being not a logo, it's the meaning attached to a mark or what people read into you, the gut feeling and everything that you put across. So the promise is a really good kind of way to define the purpose and your why. We've all been sold on this big kind of Simon Sinek kind of version of what's your why? You have to have a why or else you can't exist. And therefore, we've had a bunch of people, and Thomas will touch on it, a bunch of brands that have gone out and attached a why to their kind of original reason for being. They've kind of, but I need a big purpose, I need a bold purpose. And so they've grabbed one from Patagonia and they've started talking about their sustainability being part of their purpose. So I think actually the definition of a purposeful brand is where you're getting these kind of sketchy things. Is someone purposeful because they say they recycle plastic? They've just kind of attached that because they feel it's what the world needs. So I think every brand, be you small or big, needs to go back to your core values. Not everyone serves to be a hero. It's not why everyone exists. To kind of understand that your cosmetic makeup and communicate that internally and externally. Definitely the brands we work with, everyone wants to be the hero. Everyone wants to be Nike. Everyone wants to be the one that changes the world, but they don't really understand that the small incremental changes make the bigger difference. It's a lot of it's about how they communicate those differences inside and outside.
That's so interesting. Yeah, that this is where the authenticity kind of comes from. It's that ambition without kind of an honest context to it.
I think you've always got to go back to your original brand strategy. And look, it's easier for the smaller challenger brands because they're fresher to the table. The bigger brands are harder because you have to kind of go back into the history and the heritage. And rather than attach that kind of green mission on top of it, you need to understand why you exist. So yeah, I think it's probably easier for the challengers because they're fresh to the table and they know why they started. They know what they're in it for beyond just making money.
I have a question for you, Jane. I know you're passionate about the potential for leadership to influence culture in an organisation. How do you create a culture that is planet-centric?
Yeah, really passionate about that. And Thomas, love your line, and we'll be stealing it to use frequently, which is like who you can help people become. And I really love it because I think when I look at leadership that influences, you look at what is the maximum impact we can have, so it's obviously with yourself first and leading yourself to betterment and to constantly learning, but it's also your immediate community, your team obviously, but your client organizations, how you can have maximum impact on them, and then actually your industry itself, how can we have an impact on our industry? And we've had great experience across all three, and I think I'll just touch on those three groups from an internal perspective, looking at everything from how you hire, the processes of reviewing, and how I guess you create a culture that people understand that our behaviour, our purpose, how we show up every single day really, really matters. So we have a lot of programs that we roll out internally that help people develop a confidence. Fridays for Future, making sure everybody's green trained. We ourselves are going through the B Corp process. So for anybody who has gone through that or is going through that, you understand that it helps you really self-interrogate, actually be really hard on yourself and help you grow personally as a leader and help people become leaders themselves within the organization. So that's been a really I think growing up experience for me personally over the last couple of years, working with the team to make sure that we're improving every single operation within the organization. And as Lisa just said, it's the little things actually that all really ladder up. And I think one difference I would have when it comes to brands perspective versus what Lisa said potentially is you don't really have to go back to who you were maybe 20, 30 or 100 years ago as a brand. I think how your brand shows up today should be in the context of the world today. And we know that the world today is very, very different than it might have been 100 years ago when these brands showed up. So I think it's really important that people find and renew their purpose so that it's in line with the challenges that the world and the people in the world face. And then I think from a client perspective, when it comes to leadership, is making sure that you're helping them grow personally so that they themselves can have more impact on their teams and within their organizations as well, helping challenge the brief in a very, very respectful way. And I think, we're all dealing with, people of power, if you want to put it like that. And I think there's a real impetus, or there's a real intention, I think, from us certainly to speak the truth to power. And that's very often saying things to client organizations that they don't want to hear, or perhaps it's against what their business is built upon, but it's helping them find that strength themselves and within their own teams to flourish for the next 100 years in a way that is working in the correct context with our world and with our planet. And then I think it's really important to bring the industry together. And this is a really interesting one. And I think when I look at my own journey talking about sustainable practice over the last number of years, it is about togetherness. It is about recognizing that we're all citizens of this one community and this one world. But I often try to find motivating things that will help motivate people within the industry. And actually, a lot of it is born, a lot of what we are famous for in our industry is being competitive, out competing each other. So more recently, I've adopted that tone of voice to see maybe this will work, let's compete with each other in terms of how we can have a positive impact on the world, whether it's around sustainable practice or climate justice. So I get a little bit playful with my language from time to time, because I think you do have to test what motivates people. And we are all conditioned to think that growth and competition is the way forward. So I think you need to get playful with language so that you can lead in a way that ultimately leads to that desired outcome. And then finally, within the industry, it is about bringing them together. And Purpose Disruptors, I know that they were speaking earlier on today, has been a phenomenal collective of bringing people together and helping each other help each other, I guess. And everybody's welcome to that community. It's an open door, and it's a place where I have learned a lot, and the team that works with me has learned a lot as well. But it's also about accountability, like what can we do for the industry to share what we know and what we've learned, and how can we bring people together through events that we've hosted over the last couple of years as well. Maybe that was a bit too long.
No, that's all so interesting, actually. And actually, I have a question for Thomas that probably links that quite well. Something you're very passionate about, Thomas, that you've identified is the kind of forgetting to put people first. Why do you think a brand leader so often forget to put people first in their decision-making process?
So beside plant-based cooking, yes, I am also passionate about that other thing. You know what? I think it's as I said, honestly, I did the same mistake in the beginning with my first book, right? I think I felt that we had to build brands that sort of place themselves at the center of the universe, and that the sort of leadership that came from being sort of like a Steve Jobs type leader, that's like, I'm the visionary, this is the direction we're going in. But I think the world is just fundamentally different today. I think that, as I touched on, I think young people are not going to put up with this. The marketplace just doesn't work like that anymore at all. I mean, take my niece Clara that I referred to in the keynote. I mean, she's most stuff she shops, it's on Instagram. She knows how to get likes. She knows how to promote stuff. If if she want to buy something there and she's not happy about the color, she'll write with them. And yet we have businesses and brands that still don't realize that they don't hold any power anymore, and they're kind of holding on to it like a mother or dad that just want to hog too long, right? When you're a teenager. So I think we fundamentally need to kind of make that shift. And I think it demands boldness. I think it really demands a lot of boldness in an organization to take that step. I mean, one example is take IKEA, for example. I mean, in some aspects, they've been born with a lucky business model. I'm not talking about fast furniture, but I'm talking about the idea that it's modular. And obviously, for years, that has been tried to be, fought off. But today, they're embracing the hacker community, right? And it's so interesting to see that now a Billy bookshelf can be made even prettier because there's a carpenter somewhere in Dublin who's passionate about, carving out like whatnot. So I think the time is now for brands to understand that, yes, we need to be at the center of this, or else why should we engage?
I think that's so interesting because I can absolutely relate to that. Every brand, when they're thinking about themselves, is obviously very focused on themselves, but actually shifting that to being at the center of a cause and how they can sincerely impact that is a nice shift in thinking there.
But even take Ben & Jerry's as an example, right? So Ben & Jerry's are, famous, two good old guys, Ben and Jerry from Vermont. We want to do the best possible ice cream in the nicest possible way. Is Ben & Jerry's really the best possible ice cream anymore? Not really. It's sort of a bland industrialized product. Is it really done in the nicest possible way anymore? Hell no. I mean, so I think brands really just need to sit down for that psychology session and get over themselves.
I have a question I'm really excited to ask you, Lisa. It's related to kind of creative thinking and new ideas that brands can bring to life. What do you think are the links between bravery and creativity? And for example, I was thinking about how, brands that jump on a social bandwagon are clearly not acting with bravery because they kind of know it's a popular topic. So how, as brand partners and even possibly as consumers, can we encourage brands to stand for what they believe in, even when it's not currently trending or it's not the status quo?
And it's something that I talk quite a lot about this, and I co-host a podcast that talks a little bit about creative bravery, and I'm super passionate about it. And I do think bravery in itself needs a rebrand, because it's not about being the bravest. It's not about being Braveheart. It's not about the person who runs fastest downfield or jumps out of a plane. It's about doing things differently, even if they're uncomfortable. And I think that's the thing that we need to talk about here, I think. And there are little things you can do about that. If you set a goal, commit to it. That's one of the things that in itself is bravery. And we sort of need to talk about the role of resilience and of grit, of not about doing what everyone else is doing. IKEA was actually a really good example of last year was the year of bold pivots. Everyone who was doing something, if you made gin, you started making sanitizer, and it became this fight to survive that was pivoted to suggest they were doing it to help the world. They were, to a point, like, I get it helped the world, but then they kind of became it was really just a survival guide. And so I think when you go back to someone like IKEA, what they did was understand the problems of people last year. And some of their campaigns were about releasing marketing, which, we all need a level of marketing, that taught people how to use some of their things they might sell in an indoor capacity. How can you turn an outdoor tent into an indoor excavation center? So they kind of started to understand, again, it's going back to that, how do you understand people? What are their challenges? What are their dreams and what are their goals? And how can you reflect that? And so from a brave point of view, it's about being curious about the people you're designing for, the brands, the people that you're there to serve at the end of the day, because without them, you don't exist as a brand. So your purpose is irrelevant if you don't have people to serve. So from a bravery point of view, don't look to just do things differently for the sake of doing it differently. There's been a lot of disruptors in the world. I kind of look to what problem do you want to solve? How can you help people? And once you tap into that mindset, then you can unlock the bravery kind of things and know that it won't be easy.
So something that I wanted to touch on quickly with you, Jane, because I know it's something we could probably talk about for a long time, but I just think it'd be really interesting to get a couple of headlines from you. From your research with young people, what do they think the role of business is to shape the planet? What's kind of impressing them? What do they reject? Or even within communications, I'd always argue the worst thing that can happen is they're tuning out when brands are communicating. Do you have any interesting findings relating to that?
Well, they're absolutely tuning out, and it can become very nauseous when you're hearing the same language and the same words, as Tomas said there, coming from brands. And they're finding all sorts of ways of tuning out digitally using various different apps. So we know that. I think we've done research over a number of years as part of the Youth Lab with Youth Culture Uncovered, and we've seen definitely that they expect brands to own their own accountability when it comes to how they operate. They also have more increased awareness of the role of government as well, in terms of really helping us drive a more sustainable future. So they really see that we are, as brand owners, brand guardians, brand agencies, responsible actually, and that has only grown over the last couple of years if we compare 2019 to our most recent one in June. So definitely that, I think what they expect is honesty and transparency coming from brands. And I think as over the next couple of years, as we start seeing carbon being, carbon counts understood as calorie counts will be understood, they will expect to see brands showing up in that way. They expect quality products, and they expect quality services as well. And I think there really is a cult of now, and that's almost the biggest challenge we have. Well, there's a cult of nowness. I want my food now. I want my fashion now. And if you look at giants like Deliveroo and the growth of those, and giants like Shein and the value of those, that's really where there's the biggest conflicts and the biggest challenges that we face, I think, from a business perspective. But ultimately, it comes down to the responsibility we take as leaders of various different organisations, and of course, the challenges that how we tackle those challenges within the government guidelines. And then they expect ethical and responsible and sustainable action from brands and clients. But as I say, some of the fastest growing youth brands are in conflict with those very, very same things. And I think that this is where the really interesting conversations lie ultimately about the responsibility of organisations and of companies to operate in a way that is in line with what the planet needs.
There's actually there's some questions here coming from the audience that I want to ask, and there's one here that actually is interesting in the context of what you were just sharing there, Jane. The question is, we're seeing so much greenwashing from brands. What can be done by us as consumers to call them out? Do you have any interesting perspectives there?
I think what is done and what is being done, like young people and everybody really understands that they have the power to make or break a brand. They're incredibly highly aware of the impact of a brand from a carbon perspective, and we see it, and we work with our clients to help tell the truth and to be transparent in their response. And that's a journey that we are going on with many of our clients. And it's really about helping them find the courage to tell the truth and to be transparent and to explain. And when they do explain and when they do respond to being called out by consumers, very rightfully so in most instances, that they have the courage to go back and explain, we're in this process, these are the goals we're accountable to. And actually, a little bit of that pressure from consumers can really help accelerate the journey. And that's been my experience. So I think the pressure from consumers is a really positive pressure. And you see it, we see it all of the time. And I think this is where we see our clients and the brands really taking that ownership of the problem, fall in love with the problem. This is the problem your brand faces. This is the problem your organization faces. And if it needs consumers to remind you of that, well, so be it. Some of our clients, and we've the privilege of working with phenomenal brands that are very progressive in this area, have been ahead of consumers. And sometimes the consumers are ahead of the brands. And the answer is transparency. The answer is the truth. And that's been our experience. And, if a brand isn't quite there yet, once they're talking and once they're explaining and giving positive and good rationale for the delay, if there is a delay in any of their processes or procedures, it's always been very welcomed.
I have a really good question again from the audience that I'd be interested for, if each of you have a synopsis. I don't know how much time we'll have, but the question is, any tips for brands watching right now if they want to make change? What is the first step? What's the
I can begin easily because mine is a simple one. I think start fixing the leadership. That's my key question, and you fix that by answering that one simple question: who can you help people become?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like start looking at how intelligent is your leadership. I finished Stephen Hawking's lovely book that was put together all of his works put together, but his quote was, "Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change." I really liked that because I think the word intelligence is really powerful, actually, and will potentially help people seek change, So really looking at how intelligent is your leadership. Can they adapt to the change that this world needs right now?
And I think we've all been part of those conversations where culture starts at the top. And we've probably all worked for those businesses where we've said it's a lot of talk and no action. So if we are in leadership roles, it's our job to be the people who start the actions. It's not all about talking, it's about the doing. And if you make one kind of change, that's going to have that ripple effect.
I have one last question for all of you, but before that, we had a poll running throughout this. And the question was, do you feel big brands are well aware of their sustainable actions? And interestingly, it was split 1/3 no, 2/3 yes. So it's kind of nice to see that that's not something we're all still kind of working on to see more change with brands. So my last question for you, and we only have a few minutes left, but I'd love for each of you to just touch on this if we have time. What one thing do you believe that as professionals, because we're all professionals working in different ways with brands and their brand purpose, to encourage our kind of partners and clients to be courageously authentic? Because I think that's really kind of a theme of what we've been talking about. I don't know, Lisa, would you like to go first?
I think you need to make it really clear that there's a need for it. So I think you need to point out the need to be bold, to be brave, and to take those risks, but also make it relatable. Like ultimately, you need to land it in their worlds. That's really good. Yeah, thank you so much. Who would like to go next?
I think for me, I think you can't really succeed unless, all the change I see in organization comes from people somewhere in the organization. And I really think the biggest driver of that change comes from love or hate. Either that you love something so much so you want to protect it, or you hate something so much so you want to change it. And that's been my journey myself. I really hated the ad industry, and I felt that I had to do something about it. And I see that in many other organizations where we see change happening. So I think it's really about embracing your inner guts feeling and saying, I'm working within this company, but there's a certain thing about this that I hate. What can I do about it?
Totally.
Embracing our emotions.
And I think just the word courage comes from cur, the heart. So I think bringing the heart into the workplace is incredibly, incredibly important. The wise people learn from the past for sure, but the brave really, really learn from the future. And I think that's very important. So courage, lead from the heart.
That's a lovely sentiment. I actually have time for one last question from the panel. And I can kind of guess in part your answers. But do you think that consumers will pay a premium for brands who are truly sustainable and transparent? Or when does it vary? Because I know, as we were talking about, Jane, young people are at the moment acting very directly in conflict with their values when it comes to some of the brands that they support. But is there context, a bit like what the example you had, Thomas, with your kind of food service, where we're already seeing that from consumer audiences?
I think they will, is the short answer, and I know from all of our research that they will. But sometimes what people say in research and what they do can be in conflict. So the race is on here. How can I be the most affordable but fast and sustainable brand? So, we've 3 tracks going here. If we're competing with other brands for success, and sustainability is absolutely one of them, but so is value, so is speed. So all of those other things are incredibly important.
I think it was one of the key questions I asked in the book, and I think it comes back to the brand, and it comes back to the meaningful role you're playing in people's lives. And if you play a meaningful role in people's lives, people don't mind paying more forward. I think the research we did showed, in fact, that 29.4% of the people wanted to pay a premium price for a brand that it felt played a transformative difference in their life. So it's a wake-up call for these brands.
Go ahead.
It's a great opportunity as well to touch in on all of those. You're not cheap enough, you're not quick enough, and sustainable. What a great challenge. Like, that's the innovation, and that's the goal for the future, to be all of those things and sustainable.
Exactly.
That's an excellent note to wrap this on, actually. And thank you all so much for that discussion. I found it really interesting. So I hope everybody listening took as much from it as I did. And thank you.